This is the Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well podcast, episode 58, My Best Stuff, with the Be Better broadcast. Welcome to Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well, the podcast for women who want to lose weight but are tired of counting and calculating all the food. I'm your host, Lisa Salisbury. I'm a certified health and weight loss coach and life coach, and most importantly, a recovered chronic dieter. I'll teach you to figure out why you are eating when you aren't hungry instead of worrying so much about what you are eating. So I was listening to one of my favorite podcast hosts the other day. It's Peter Attia from the Drive podcast. Obviously, huge podcast there, very well known. But I noticed that he was interviewed on a different podcast, and I saw a clip of it, and I was intrigued. So I did listen to that whole episode, and what I loved about it was the host really pulled out Dr. Attia's very best stuff. It was like a highlight reel of all of his most important concepts. Now, I'm no Peter Attia, but I was interviewed by Brandon Eastman on the Be Better broadcast, and I gotta say, he did an amazing job of pulling out my highlight reel. This interview was a great review of some of my most important concepts that I teach. I think you're really going to love it. So I decided to publish that whole interview here on the Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well podcast. I covered the hunger scale in quick review. We talk a little bit about your scale weight and how that number is data. We talk about getting a clear picture on your normal fluctuations. We get into some emotional eating with the higher and lower brain and how they interact together with eating decisions. Brandon also asked me about loving your body, and so I gave him some great bridge thoughts that you can use to really help with that. Basically, like I said, it is a highlight reel for me, and I think you're going to really enjoy this review of a lot of these concepts. And of course, check out Brandon's podcast. I will link to his show in the show notes, and all of the things that he indicates at the end that he would put in his show notes, those are also in mine. So everything that you need is going to be there in the notes. So let's get to this interview with Brandon.
Welcome to the Be Better broadcast. We are joined today by Lisa Salisbury, who is a health and weight loss life coach for women who want to lose weight without counting and calculating their food. As a former chronic dieter, Lisa knows what it's like to be all consumed with everything that goes into your mouth. It was only when Lisa learned the tools and skills through coaching that she was able to drop the dieting obsession and drop her weight. Lisa is a certified health coach through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition and a certified life coach and weight loss coach. She has a bachelor's of science from Brigham Young University in health and human performance. And if you are someone who has struggled with always calculating and being observant of what you're putting into your mouth and the feelings that are associated with that, and maybe you've had an up and down weight loss journey, or maybe you're just someone who hears this concept of emotional eating and you say to yourself, this is me, or this was me, or there's someone in my life who's facing this and I want to help them, then this conversation is going to be for you. So when you take even one strategy or idea or principle away from this conversation with Lisa, all that we ask is you share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. So without further ado, Lisa, it's great to have you on the broadcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. So good to be here, Brandon.
Yeah, and it's great to have you. And when I saw you come across my scope and what you talk about, like I already told you before we started recording, it struck close to home because throughout my upbringing, I was always the fat kid, like always the fat kids. From like 7 years old, I was the chubby kid with the bowl cut in school. And looking back, it's very clear to see why. I mean, I grew up in a great household, loving parents, raised by father and mother. The cupboards were always stocked with salt and vinegar chips and Lay's with the French onion dip. And like, I know all the good fat kid foods to go to, and I still indulge sometimes in those same things. But now I am more observant about what I'm putting into my body and what it consists of and whether it's good, whether it's not. So back then I definitely had a problem with emotional eating. And even still today, there will be a time where I'm having a tough time and I will resort to one of the greatest drugs of all, which is the food that we put in our mouth. So I'm really excited to dive into these concepts with you today.
Yeah, great. And that is kind of interesting when we're talking about our childhood because we never want our parents to like listen to these episodes and be like, "Oh, thanks a lot." But, it's not throwing them under the bus. You're just like, it's just something I've learned at this point that is different than what we knew back then. That's okay.
Definitely. Now, you do what you're doing because of your own personal experience with emotional eating and dieting and all that. So for
Mhm.
those who don't know you, can you give us an idea of where you come from with this concept?
Yeah, sure. So I also tended to be on the chubbier side when I was younger. It was pointed out really clearly by my classmates in seventh grade as we were watching a video from earlier in our in our education together. Everyone was laughing like, "Look at Lisa, look how fat she is." And just went on to having several adults in my life in high school and then in college point out that I should lose some weight. And these were kind of like trusted adults that, teachers, coaches, things like that. And so I just learned pretty young in those formative years that there was something wrong, quote
Mhm.
unquote, with my body and the shape that it was. So um I started into then having babies and nursing, which is a wild ride for your body.
Mhm.
So I just had a lot of thoughts about that. A lot of thoughts about, well, now I'm pregnant. It's okay to be fat. And this is the last time. I knew it was my last baby. I'm like, this is the last time I can eat whatever I want. And all these thoughts that now I like remember having. But as I look back, I'm like, wow, those were number one, completely incorrect because obviously pregnancy is not a time that is also unhealthy overweight, right? That's not an unhealthy weight gain. Like you're supposed to do that. And just the idea that like after this pregnancy, I won't be able to eat what I want. Also, just not true. So it just really led me for a couple decades to be on just several diets. I was yo-yo dieting up and down, up and down, up and down. And finally, when I came across coaching, I understood that this is happening in my brain. And the biggest problems were happening because I was trying to satisfy the brain, not the body. I had completely ignored what my body was telling me. And especially when I was counting and calculating my food. So, what I mean by that is like counting calories, calculating your macros. I'm trying to hit macros between plus or minus 5 grams on every macro every day. Like, that is a video game you do not want to play with yourself every single day. It just created a lot of stress for me, a lot of anxiety. If counting macros works for you, that's fabulous. For me, it made me completely obsessive about my food. And I just completely ignored what my body was telling me. So I'm checking in with my diet app and I'm like, how much food should I eat? Or how much food do I have left for today? And completely ignoring what my body was telling me. So I'm eating lunch meat in front of the refrigerator trying to meet my protein macros when I'm not even hungry. That makes no sense,
Yeah.
right? And ignoring when I needed energy from carbohydrates like, well, I don't have any carb macros left. Too bad for me. I better just eat a meat stick. Like it just didn't make any sense. I completely disregarded what my body was telling me and I didn't really lose that much weight. It just wasn't really working for me. And, intense boot camp type training programs and stuff, my body just shut down. It's like, we will hold on to everything you're putting in because this feels really unsafe.
Yeah.
So, once I let go of someone else or a diet app telling me how much to eat or what to eat, I really was able to pay attention to what my brain was telling me and what my body was responding to.
Wow. What a story. So many things I want to dive into there, but I'm curious. So at that point in your story, what did you do? You mentioned you started coaching, you started working with a coach or going through a program.
Mhm.
So what were some of the big shifts that you made in order to better listen to your body rather than cater to your brain?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things is rather than counting food by calories or macros, I use what I call a hunger scale, which is totally reliant on your body. So it would be similar in exercise to the exertion scale when you have like a scale of 1 to 10 and they'll say we want you at an 8 right now rather than looking at a heart rate monitor. It's a self-regulating measure of how you are feeling. And so I use a hunger scale that goes from -10 through 0 to +10.
Wow.
0 is neutral. -10 is so hungry, you're like weak with hunger, not like I skipped breakfast and now I'm starving. Like this is several hours. It's very uncomfortable. I have a whole episode on this, so I won't go into the whole thing, but +10 is like, Thanksgiving dinner, 3 pieces of pie, you got to lay down in a dark room, unbutton your pants. It's equally uncomfortable. And I think this is a big realization too, is that and this is a little bit of a side note, but I think our society really glorifies overeating. We have all these hashtags, food porn, food coma, these kinds of things. And it's like overeating, let's be honest, it doesn't actually feel good.
Mm-mm.
When you're when you're really thinking about your body, you actually feel pretty crappy. So being super hungry and being super full, they're both very, very uncomfortable. So that's why I give them the same scores, just on opposite end of the hunger scale. So rather than using a hunger scale that goes from like 1 to 10, which I've seen, I like to use the -10 to +10 so you can see like this is equally terrible, right? We're equidistant from 0, from neutral. So neutral is neither hungry nor full. This is usually about an hour to 2 hours after a meal. You're not feeling any food in your stomach, but you're not also feeling any pangs of hunger.
Hmm.
So I guide my clients to eat when they're at about a -3. It's time to eat. We're feeling those natural hunger signals like your body is telling you it's been several hours, it's time to eat. And we want to eat through 0 all the way to +3. And this is actually really important because in my dieting days, I tended to snack. The diets that tell you, "Oh, you've got to eat every 2 hours to keep your metabolism revving." That's garbage. Our bodies were made to eat and then stop eating and process and digest and then eat again. When we're constantly putting food on top of food on top of food, first of all, you're never getting to that +3 or 4 really satisfied feeling. So of course you're hungry all day. And
Yeah.
then who wants to eat all day? That like people that are like, I just think about food all day. It's because you're not waiting for hunger and then eating a full meal. If the idea that like if you're not hungry enough to eat an apple, don't eat. I say if you're not hungry enough to eat a meal, like let's wait. Let's wait until you're hungry enough to eat a meal. And maybe you are. You probably are. If you're like, I'm hungry, you're probably ready to eat a meal. And then sit down, put it on a plate, butt in the chair and eat something till you're satisfied to a +3. You're going to find that this is going to stabilize you throughout the day so much more than eating these snacks, jumping around. If you think about that hunger scale, jumping around the -1, +1, right? I have clients that say, I don't know, I just was hungry all day. I'm like, did you ever sit down and actually eat a meal? No, I was busy. I grabbed this, I grabbed that. Well, you think about your hunger scale, you're jumping around that neutral. You're a little hungry, you eat a little snack, you're a little hungry, you eat a little snack, and you feel like you are hungry all day. Let's wait for -3 hunger. Let's wait until we're hungry with true physical symptoms and then eat until we're satisfied. Eat until we've had enough, but we're not full. So the line between that -3 up to or excuse me, the when we're on the full side, the
Mhm.
+3 to that +4 and 5, then we're getting into fullness. We want to learn to stop. And this is to answer your original question. This was probably the biggest key for me. Not only the waiting for physical hunger, but understanding what was enough.
Mm.
Because Emotional hunger doesn't just look like crying face down into a quart of ice cream. It also looks like, gosh, that was really good. I don't hardly ever get this food. I'm going to have seconds. When
Mm.
we're eating past our physical fullness, our physical enough, then we're moving into emotional hunger because that hunger is coming from the brain, not from a signal of the body.
Yes, because we know that we don't really need that extra food. But like as an example, my wife made her pot pie last night, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't make it very often. So like what you just said, I don't get this very often. So maybe I'll go back for seconds. I was more than full from the first bowl of pot pie. But I still went back and got more because I was like, I'm gonna be really, really full after this, but she doesn't
Mm-hmm.
ever do this normally. So I went back and I got more. And like I'm a healthy guy, I'm a fit guy now, but that's because I take a lot of different measures to keep myself that way and keep moving
Mm-hmm.
forward. But there was definitely a time where every meal I was able to create a reason as to why I needed more food, which is actually causing me to go up on that scale and now become engorged and overfull and feeling gross. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just not a way of feeling that I want it to be.
Right. Yeah. Because you're like, hey, I don't want my body to feel this way. It has, there's so much more than just the number on the scale. You're like, I don't want to feel this way in my body. That's probably the primary reason why you decided to drop overeating.
Yes. Speaking of the number on the scale, how often would you say is important for us to weigh ourselves and look at that number? Because myself personally, I used to weigh myself every single day. And
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of different people because my coaching takes many different facets, but it always goes back to the life coaching aspect. And I know a lot of different people who weigh themselves every single day. And
Mm-hmm.
very rarely are we weighing ourselves and saying, wow, I'm really happy with that number that I see on that scale. So, what are your thoughts behind that?
Yeah. That's an interesting question because I have to say it's very client specific for me. So I don't really think there's anything wrong with weighing yourself every day if you are treating that number as data, which it is. That number on the scale is math. Numbers are math. Numbers tell you just a data point. So this data point tells you the gravitational pull on your body at that moment in time. If you are able to keep the number as data, no problem. Weigh yourself every day. It can be super helpful. It can really help dial in your food journal. Like, oh, I notice when I eat these particular foods, it tends to make me retain water because when you know that number as data and you see a 2 pound jump overnight, you're like, oh, that's water weight, obviously, because it is, by the way. Right. You can't gain 2 pounds of fat overnight. It's very difficult to do that. So most of those like those larger fluctuations are going to be from water weight. And then likewise, when we see a 2 pound drop, we'll ask ourselves, am I dehydrated? Like, what workout did I do yesterday that maybe either increase my blood volume because it was a heavy cardio workout, or maybe who knows? There's all kinds of ways that you can look at that number and then see what you've done the day or week before. The other reason why it's helpful to weigh every day is because if you pick a day, say, I weigh on Fridays, or I weigh, every 2 weeks, or the first of the month, or whatever, if that day is a water weight gain day and you are up on the scale compared to the week before, it maybe you're up, but maybe that's water weight. And so having a daily weigh in can give you a better picture of those normal fluctuations with the hydration level in your body. And then you can see that clear downward. If you are on a weight loss trajectory, you can see how it's up, it's down, it's up, it's down a little more, it's up a little more. And weight loss, just it's not that straight down line that we want to see. It's all over the place. But if you are seeing a downward trajectory, then you know that what you're doing is having the effect that you want it to. If we're just taking our weight, once every 2 weeks, we can see that downward trajectory, but we may be frustrated because we see an uptick and we're not realizing that it's water because we didn't see the day before when we were down. So If you are a person who is like, I can't see the number and not make it mean something about myself. I can't I can't see it and make and understand that it's data. That's work that you need to do. I actually do like scale work with my clients. We have a whole worksheet on it about, what we're thinking when we see it, what we're making that number mean. Because the truth is, somebody else is seeing your number and is celebrating. When you're having a pity party about the number, someone else is seeing that exact same number and celebrating
Whoa.
because they use their your current weight is someone else's goal weight, whether
Oh,
it's their goal weight for that week or their goal weight for their life. I have had several clients who come to me that they're like their goal weight is other clients' current weight. So it is math. It doesn't tell you anything about your worth. And when if we can make it mean this is helpful data, then by all means, weigh every day. And if you do that, if you decide to do that, be consistent. First of the morning, after you use the bathroom, prior to drinking any significant amounts of liquid, just for consistency's sake. Not because that will be your lowest weight, but because it will be the most consistent time, right? You don't have the same thing for breakfast every day. You don't have the same thing for lunch. It's not helpful to weigh after dinner. Like, it's not helpful to weigh during the day when you are doing different workouts, eating different food. It's not consistent. So do it at a consistent time. Don't compare Monday morning to Thursday afternoon. That's not helpful.
wow. I'm so glad I asked you that question because I did not expect that answer. That was fantastic for many reasons. That gave me chills when you said that your number that you may look at and think, oh man, that's not where I want to be. Why is that number so high? A year ago it was this and now I'm this. That number someone else is celebrating. Your number is someone else's goal. That gave me chills to think about because I never thought about it that way, and it puts a whole different meaning on the practice of weighing yourself. And I love how you said, and my biggest takeaway there is, treat the scale and the number that you see as exactly what it is. It is a number. That it's a digital number, it's an analog number, it's just a number. A number is math, and that math is used as data in order
Mhm.
to help you track and measure your progress. And there's that famous quote, what you track and measure grows. And I come from the sales world. What you measure
Mm.
will continue to grow. If you have more output, if you make more phone calls, send more emails, you're going to have more results. If you weigh yourself more, then you're able to course correct, you're able to have a better understanding. But it's more so about changing the association with what that number means, it sounds like.
Yeah, for sure.
That's amazing. I love that. So I have to ask you, you talk about I want to make sure I have this right. You talk about the higher and the lower brain when it
Mm.
comes to this concept of emotional eating. So you've already mentioned the relationship between what we do, what our brain is saying versus what our body is saying. So what is the higher and the lower brain? What does that mean?
Yeah, so of course there's like tons of different parts of the brain. So to break it down into two parts is kind of simplistic, but the idea is we have our lower brain is kind of that like animal part. It's some people will call it the lizard brain. Um, Metaphorically, I'll call it the toddler brain because it wants what it wants and it wants it right now. With it about it. It's the part of the brain that's like, if we don't do this, we're probably going to die. And the higher brain is the part that other animals on earth don't have. It's the part that makes us human. It's the part that can plan ahead. It's the part that makes decisions based on our future selves. And it's the part that's looking out for our greatest good. So when we're making our food decisions from our lower brain, which is typically what we do, we're like, the meme that's like, I'm on the seafood diet. I see food and I eat it. Like that's the lower brain, right? Right? Like that's the ultimate example of what the lower brain does. And it's the part that says we never get this, we might not have this food again. And when you really listen to that, you're realizing, oh, that's my scarcity brain. That's the part of my brain that still thinks that I live in a tribe and that we're not sure when the next kill or when we're going to come across the next field of berries. Our brains truly have not caught up to the fact that there is a grocery store and a fast food restaurant on every corner. Like it, if you think about how long our humans have been here surviving, it's it's the tiniest blip that food has been plentiful.
Yeah.
Even 100 years ago, I mean, if you've done any kind of research into family history or read your great grandmother's stories, they're like, well, there were 11 kids and, there wasn't always enough around the table. Like even just 100 years ago, there wasn't always enough. And our brains are like, what if there's not enough? And that's that lower brain kicking in. I better eat more because there's plenty of food right now. I should eat this now because this is when it's available.
Yeah.
So when we kick into using the higher brain, this is really the part that we're going to use to access that hunger scale, number one. And number two, this is the part that's going to plan ahead. This is the part that's going to say, I want to feel good going to bed tonight. Like it doesn't even have to be, I'm not even talking about your long-term goals, right? Like just the future enough. Like, I don't want to be so full that I don't sleep well tonight. I don't want to be bloated. I don't want to choose this food because surely I will be bloated in the morning if this is my food choice tonight. And then, of course, a couple weeks out, couple months out, actually, my long term goal is to drop a little weight. And so I'm going to stop right here at enough. And your lower brain will scream at you when you decide to do this. This is not just like, oh, easy, I'll just use my higher brain, no problem. No, like your lower brain will be like, but we might die. And it doesn't actually say that. But what's happening is when we eat for emotional reasons, whether that's this is delicious, I'm going to eat more, or I feel crappy, it's been a hard day, I deserve this, or gosh, I'm just bored, we get a dopamine hit. Food tastes great. It hits our mouth, especially when we're going to be choosing ultra processed foods. They hit that mouth and you get a dopamine hit. Now, we get a dopamine hit even from, chicken and broccoli or chicken pot pie. That's a delicious meal. It's well balanced. You've got protein, you've got fiber in there from the vegetables, you've got carbs, healthy fats, hopefully in the crust, right? Like lots of good stuff going on in that pot pie. So you are getting a dopamine hit from that. Your brain is like, this is good. We should do this again. The next time we see pot pie, we should eat it again because this is helping us with survival. That's what dopamine is it tells the brain this thing that we're doing, this will keep us alive. Again, that's a simplistic idea of the brain. But what happens then is so we've eaten that pot pie, that was great. Our brain is like, that's good. And then your wife brings out chocolate brownie sundae, and your brain is like, oh, we've had this before. This is very essential for survival because that's a concentrated food and it's going to give you a concentrated hit of dopamine.
Wow.
And so you're going to desire that more. That equates to a stronger desire. So when you're like, oh, I just love desserts, or maybe it's salty foods for you, it's because it's giving you a stronger hit of dopamine in the past, and your brain interprets that as very essential for survival.
Even if in the future it's going to make us feel bad.
Yes, because that's coming from that lower brain. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we want to use our higher brain as much as possible to make our food decisions. So that looks like deciding ahead what you're going to eat for the day. And this isn't in an app. This isn't like based on calorie counts. It's just like writing down, I'm going to have oatmeal for breakfast. I'm going to have, leftover pot pie for lunch. Doesn't even have to be, fancy. And for dinner, we're going to have enchiladas. Like
Yeah.
we're just writing that down. And then when you go to make lunch, and you're like, oh, I was going to have leftovers. And your brain's like, that doesn't really sound good. Let's have this. That is your lower brain kicking in. And we're like, no, we decided ahead that we're going to have the leftover pot pie or whatever it was. And we eat that. When you do that, when you eat what you have planned, number one, you've used your higher brain to make your food decisions. And number two, you build trust with yourself.
Wow.
The more often you plan and then do what you plan, your brain is like, oh, that's weird. We didn't cancel on ourselves. We usually do. Maybe we can do this. And the more often you do that, the more trust you build with yourself. And then you can start up leveling your food. Instead of maybe having, chips with my sandwich every day, I think I'm going to plan some carrots.
Mm-hmm.
And because you've eaten the chips that you planned every single day for 2 weeks, your brain is like, yeah, we do eat what we plan. So today I planned carrots. I'm going to eat that.
You have more power, more personal power in that decision
Mm-hmm,
making.
mm-hmm.
I love the planning concept, and it seems so simple. Yet, what you're describing, every time you're saying these different concepts, I think to myself, "Wow, I'm doing that," or "I used to do that," or like with the planning idea, it's when I plan to fail for what I'm going to eat that day. Is when it gets to dinner time and I look at my wife and say, "So what are we doing for dinner?" And then we generally always make a bad choice. We're not going to say,
Mm-hmm.
let's go get Subway or let's make salads and chicken and broccoli. No, it's let's order Uno's or let's get Applebee's or let's get Five Guys or whatever it is. It's when I
Mm-hmm.
plan to fail the day ahead that I make those bad decisions. And planning ahead, even if you are going to have a quote unquote bad meal, whether it's Five Guys or McDonald's or whatever it might be, or you're doing a giant Thanksgiving dinner, it's okay to still plan that because now you can make a different decision for breakfast and for lunch that help to equate the difference that that bad meal is going to make. And it also makes you feel better at the same time. And
Mm-hmm.
that concept of planning for how you're going to feel when you go to bed is so powerful because imagine asking yourself, how is this meal going to make me feel in 3 hours and 2 hours? Like, as an example, I love Moe's. And it's weird because the home wrecker bowl from Moe's, I'll ask you, do you ever get Moe's? Is that something you ever frequent?
Well, as you know, I live in California, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
Whoa, I didn't realize Moe's wasn't out there. Okay. Do you
Yeah,
have
what kind of food is
Chipotle?
it? Oh yeah, we have Chipotle.
You have
Yeah.
Chipotle. Okay, so Moe's is like Chipotle. It's literally like
Okay.
the same concept. People are gonna
Okay.
hate me in the comments for that, but it's very similar concept. They have a burrito bowl essentially,
Okay.
and the ingredients like singly are good ingredients. Like you got the beans,
Sure.
you got the rice, you got the protein. But when I combine all of them, I feel like crap for the next few hours. So even though I love that meal, I'm very calculated about when I eat that meal because of how it makes me feel. But that's a mature decision that
Mhm.
I've only developed for myself in the past few years, I would say.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Do you feel bad because of the ingredients or because of the quantity?
Oh, it's probably the quantity. That's true. It's a lot of
Yeah.
food.
Yeah. It's a lot of food if you're going to clean your plate.
Yeah.
Yeah. What if you just didn't? What if you're like, I totally feel like Moe's. That sounds delicious. And then you only ate 3/4 of what you typically eat. Or you just were like, I'm going to eat this Moe's bowl until I'm a +3 hungry, whatever that, or three, sorry, a +3 on my hunger scale.
It's like
Th-
half the bowl.
Half the bowl. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
then,
so
and then
hard.
you just got 2 meals for the price of one because now you're going to have it for lunch the next day.
Oh, wow. I was just going to ask you, how do you do that? And it's not just throw the rest away, but
No,
save it for later. Wow.
absolutely.
It sounds
Yeah.
so simple, doesn't it? But even you saying that to me is making me think like, wow, maybe I'll
Yeah.
do that next time.
The thing is that when we call these foods good or bad, the problem is you're like, sometimes I go to Moe's and I eat this and then I'm bad because you decided that Moe's food is bad, and so then you are bad for
Oh,
eating it. When we label our food good and bad, we inadvertently label ourselves. How many times have you heard someone say, "Oh, I've been good today. I had a salad for lunch."
all the time.
Or all the time. "Oh my gosh, I was so bad. I ate donuts out of the break room." Like, no, you are not bad. You ate a food that you believe doesn't agree with you or that made your body feel some sort of negative way. But you did not ever change your value. You are infinitely worthy. You do not change your value based on what you eat. And so I eat those kinds of foods, let me tell you, all the time. All the
Yeah.
time. I just don't overeat them.
You're so uplifting. Like truly, truly uplifting. Like, and you give off these vibrant vibes in general that I can see how you help people just having you in their corner to help them navigate these things, because even me, who has developed more quote unquote control over these impulses, where now I fit well into clothes, I'm happy with myself. Most days I'm happy with myself. I still have these instances where going to Moe's and planning ahead and all these things, and you're just describing them in a way that's very refreshing to me. And I know that's the same for people listening and your clients as well. So it's awesome. I have two more things I want to dive into with you.
Okay.
The first I'll ask you is this. So you work specifically, and I'm sure you do work with some men as well, but you specifically work
I
with
actually do.
women
Yeah.
to help them with these things.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the woman who, let's say, and this can be helpful for anyone who's had a big change in their body, but let's go back to the pregnancy talk that we had before. A woman who's pregnant, and obviously her body changes, and maybe she's not as hard on herself during the pregnancy because she's got another human growing inside of her. Let's say after the pregnancy, so now we're 6 weeks post pregnancy, we're 2 months, we're 3 months. Like, how does maybe you can speak from experience, how does one start to love themselves again and make progress forward after such a change in the body?
Yeah. So you're kind of saying like, the concept for a woman that's like, my body is only worthy of love when it looks a certain way.
Hmm.
Right. And so because it looks different now that I have had a baby, then I have to work hard to love it again. And we do have the option to love it all the way through. And the thing is, every day is not going to be a good body image day, even if you've worked hard on that. Even if you've done all the coaching and worked on the thoughts and all of that, sometimes you're going to wake up and be like, well, I feel like a busted can of biscuits. Like, it happens. The key is, what do you do with that thought? And it's really similar to the scale number. What do you do with that? You see that number that you're not super thrilled about. What do you do with that? What my clients do and what I help them do is not eat over it. When we are having a bad body image day, when we're like not loving what's happening right then, the idea is to say, this is a thought that happens sometimes, and I'm not going to compensate and help myself feel better by getting a dopamine hit from eating. How else can I make myself feel better? And having some tools, having some things where you're like, okay, I also get a dopamine hit from a walk outside, from hugging my children, having a great conversation with my partner. There's all kinds of ways we can get a dopamine hit that is not eating. And when we have a list of those kinds of things and have ideas of other things we can do, we can choose differently. When a woman is really unhappy with their shape, it is not helpful for me to just say, love your body, because your brain's going to immediately reject that.
Yeah.
And so you want to kind of go at it from a couple different ways of kind of getting to that thought. I'm not, if I'm thinking all the time, I hate my body, so gross, look at all this issues, problems in the mirror, and I tell you, okay, what I want you to think now is my body is beautiful, your brain will be like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
So we want to start with a neutral thought, like, I have a body. All bodies look different. Mine looks this way today. You can even think bodies are funny looking, because if you go out in the world, there are some funny looking bodies, and not because they're funny, haha, let's make fun of those people, but because, like, look at that interesting shape. Sometimes I'm fascinated with faces.
Oh,
How
yeah.
many ways faces can be constructed out of the same general parts? And it's the
Yeah.
same thing with bodies. Like, bodies are constructed differently. And so when we think about these neutral thoughts, we can also apply them to ourselves. My body is constructed differently today. I have a body. I have a body that gets up every day, that walks around, that takes care of children, that makes food for people. Like, think about the things the body is actually doing for you. And you can also use what I call bridge thoughts, which are bridges to the thoughts that we want to think. So if we want to think things like, my body is amazing, we can bridge that with, I'm learning that my body is amazing. I'm becoming a person who loves my body. And so that is not like immediate rejection for the brain. If you say, I'm becoming a person who, your brain will want to start proving that true. If you just say, my body is amazing, your brain will be like, no, here's all the reasons why. But if you start thinking, I'm becoming a person who believes my body is amazing, or maybe my body is amazing. We just add these qualifiers on. I call them bridges. Maybe my body is amazing. And then you get curious, and your brain will be like, yeah, because you know what? You birthed 3 children. Or because you know what? You kept all the children alive today. Like, your body actually is what did that. Like, we think it's our brain, or, but like, you physically like wiped the butts and made the mac and cheese and like did the things,
Yeah.
buckled the car seats, like you did that.
Wow.
So
I just I love that answer. I think that's helpful for everybody who isn't happy with maybe the way that they look when they look in the mirror. Because what's a body? Like, what is a right and what is a good looking normal body? It's usually what society has told us is good looking. It's usually the Kim
mhm.
Kardashian or the Brad Pitt or the Tom Cruise or whatever it is that you're
Well,
looking at.
and depending on the decade, by the way,
True.
Kim certainly wasn't beautiful in the late 90s.
Oh, yeah. It's
So,
very true.
you
Yes.
know, that was the waif era, which is, my high school era. So that's rough on a brain, you know?
Absolutely. Okay, great. So I love that idea of bridging what we may think to what we want to think and how we want to feel. And I love that question, or I love that statement of I'm becoming a person who believes that my body is amazing. And I love these questions and statements that you're creating, because the thing is, like, we hear these things and those listening might say, that sounds so simple, but I've never thought of it that way. Well, of course not, because you don't know what you don't know. And really, what you're giving
Mhm.
people are new thought tools and activities that they can go to when they're not feeling great in order to feel better. Even
Mhm.
that, making a list of how else can I feel better right now in this moment. One of the reasons that I would say I feel great for the majority of my day is I have a lot of different things that I can go to in order to feel good. Like, I
Mhm.
enjoy working on my show. So if I'm not feeling too great, I'll do some things for my show to get that sense of accomplishment. I have 2 guitars on their stands upstairs that I'll pick up for literally 10 to 15 minutes at times and during stretches, where after I'm done playing, I feel better. I have a gym membership 2 minutes away that I can go to feel better. I don't always want to go there, but sometimes I do, and it causes me to feel better. So the question I'd pose to everyone listening, like you already asked, is what are the different activities in your day that will help you to feel better, to get you into a different state of being? Because when you're in
Mhm.
a better state, you make different decisions, as you know.
Yeah, totally. Can I just pop in one more thing about emotional eating?
Yeah.
Okay. I had this client yesterday, and she had like a really rough week, and anyway, won't go into all that, but she said, I chose to eat the ice cream, and I said to myself, I'm eating this because I'm feeling these ways. I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. And I know this ice cream is going to help me feel better for 2 minutes, for 5 minutes. It's going to help me feel better right this minute. And today, this is what I have the capacity to do. This is the way I'm going to soothe myself. And I know the food is not actually the solution. Guess what? That was it. That was it. The very next meal, she was right back on track. She decided in that moment that the food was going to help, but she knew it was only a temporary fix. And I think it's a really, really mature adult way to choose emotional eating, because sometimes you will. But she said it used to be that I would eat the ice cream and I would think, I'm never going to get this right. I'm never going to lose weight. Here I go again. And instead, she was like, I know what I'm doing and I don't have to keep doing this. And then guess what? She was right back on track and she's down 2 pounds since our last session,
Wow.
even when she ate the ice cream. So when you choose to eat the food, do that. Do it as a choice. I'm choosing this, knowing full well it's not actually going to solve your stress. It's not actually going to solve, your anger, all those things that we use it to solve for. Be really honest with yourself, and then we just don't beat ourselves up about it, because the worst thing you can do when you overeat, if you've overeaten or eaten something that doesn't agree with you, you already feel kind of gross in your body. You already feel bad. We've talked about that overeating doesn't actually feel good. Let's not punch ourselves in the face about it then. Let's not make it worse by being so mean to ourselves in our heads, by saying all those things. You're never going to get this. Look at you eating again. Like, that's just adding insult to injury, really. And
Yeah.
so don't punch yourself in the face when you do have an emotional eat, because you will, because you're not a robot, because everybody that loses weight also overeats occasionally. So I don't want anyone listening to this thinking like, okay, well, I shouldn't ever overeat again. You will, because it happens. But the faster you can get out of that cycle, the more likely you'll continue down that weight loss path.
Beautifully said. For those listening who are like, I need more of this, and there was like 5 or 10 different things in this that just, it was like an epiphany in my mind. You got to check out Lisa's podcast. It's called Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well. And I'd like to ask you, Lisa, what inspired your podcast that you are reaching 1 year on your podcast, which is incredible. So tell me, what inspired your podcast and what can people expect to find when they visit your podcast?
Yeah, I feel like I was inspired just because, okay, well, the real reason is I was tired of trying to do reels on Instagram. I just decided, you know what? I think I'm better on audio than always on video. And then here I am on video with Brandon.
Yeah.
But it's, less of the acting and the pointing towards and all of that seemed to be the thing with reels. And I just felt like I had a lot to share. I just felt like I wanted to give more than what was, allowed in those captions, the tiny captions and these 1-minute clips. I just wanted to give people more information, more tools, more ideas of how to start. Like, I really hope that you lose your first 5 pounds just listening to the podcast. I really do hope that. I really hope there's enough information there for you to be like, hey, yeah, I'm going to try that. And I'm going to feel some success. I'm going to try that new thought she gave me. I'm going to try thinking differently. I'm going to drop the good, bad food labels. Whatever episode it is you're listening to, I hope you try it. And I hope that you feel just a little bit better that day. And that's really what inspired me, is to just give you some value well before you're considering paying me, because it's very hard to jump into a coaching relationship. It's personal, right? And I want you to know me a little more. I want you to hear that, I I am in your corner. I do have compassion. I know where you're at, and I do have the tools to help you. So that's really kind of why I started the podcast. I feel like there was 2 parts to that question, but that's all I remember.
Well, I'll go to the second part now. So for that person who has checked out your podcast and they realize, wow, this is even more incredible than just that one-off episode with Brandon on the broadcast. When that person is ready to work with you, who have you found is the best fit to work with you one-on-one in order to implement all the different things that we're talking about today?
Mhm. So usually that person has dieted in the past. And so you kind of have an idea of like what foods work for you, and you just can't figure out why you aren't eating those foods all the time. If you are the kind of person that is ready to really be in charge of your health and not depend on a diet app to tell you what to eat. That's really the kind of person that I think has success with this. Somebody who's ready to say, like, here are all the ways that I feel when I eat and be really honest. I think a person who's ready to get really honest with why they're overeating and figure that out together, not on your own, not like, okay, you figure it out and then come tell me and then I'll work with you. I mean, like, if you're like, I'm ready to figure out why I just seem to consistently overeat, that's the kind of person that I think is ready to work with me.
Beautifully said. I love that. Where's the best place for people to get in touch with you if that all resonates and they're like, I'm ready to take the leap now, even if I didn't listen to the podcast yet, which you should, but if they haven't, where can they chat with you?
So I would love to schedule a free session. That's kind of jumping right in, but I do offer a free session if you want to. I just always say the best way to know if coaching is going to work for you is to get a little coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can always schedule a free session to chat with me and see if the coaching that I offer during that session is something that resonates with you. But if you just want to kind of lurk a little bit, I am still on Instagram, not as many dancing reels. But of course, checking out the podcast. And then I also have a free ebook that can help you get started with some of your planning. It's called the Go-To Meals ebook, and it just helps you get an idea of meals that work for you and just kind of, it's a helpful tool to start with planning things that you are consistently eating and that work for you. So it tells you what go-to meals are. I go through each meal, give you some examples of what mine are, even a few recipes in there. So I'm sure that link will be in the description.
Amazing. Yes, links are in the description to Lisa's podcast, as well as where you can get in touch with Lisa. And wow, this has been an awesome conversation, and I've kept you longer than I told you I would, but I couldn't help it. There's so much more to dive into, and I'd love to have you back on the show in the future to even dive more into some of these concepts, or maybe some different concepts. So this has been really amazing, Lisa. Thank you for your time, and thanks for sharing what you shared with everybody.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Wow. I'll say it again. What a conversation. I don't say this very often, guys, especially the ones who tune into every episode. This was one of my favorite conversations on the broadcast in 300 episodes. And again, it was one of my favorites because it struck close to home. But listen, I've made a lot of progress in terms of my own fitness and my own health. And I even have a whole chapter about it in my book on physical mastery. And I was introduced to a whole new world of tools to use. Many of those tools being questions that I can ask myself or statements that I can make in order to go to a different option or a choice to feel better, rather than resorting to food when maybe I'm already a 3 on the hunger scale, or maybe an 8 or a 9 or 10 on the hunger scale, but I'm still deciding to eat more of that Moe's bowl. Like, I took a lot away personally, and I hope that you did too. If you did, please share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. And links are in the description to go check out Lisa's podcast, Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well. If you liked this, you'll love that show. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching and listening. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.
Thanks for joining Brandon and I today. I hope you loved that interview. Again, check out his podcast because I do think he has a great interviewing style and has some really, really great guests. So again, that link to his show will be in the show notes. Also, I wanted to say that if you missed getting one of those free food planning sessions, don't despair. I think there is one left the first week in September. So I just don't know when that last one is going to get picked up. So I did offer 10 sessions this round. If you're still interested in doing one of those, I'll keep a running list. So go ahead and feel free to DM me on Instagram or send me a quick email. I do always still have those free strategy sessions, free coaching sessions. That is just your opportunity to see if coaching will work for you. We don't specifically focus on the food planning aspect, more where you're at and what your goals are, and just see if coaching is right for you. So those are always available. And if I get enough requests, I might run another round of those free food planning sessions in a couple of months. So like I said, hop on, make sure that that last one hasn't been scooped up. It might be waiting there just for you. All right, have a great week, and I will talk to you soon.